Hey, Regina, thank you for joining me again. I'm so excited that you agree to take some time out of your busy schedule to chat with us and help these YouTube viewers sell more houses and have great strategies. Specifically, we're going to talk about open houses and some of the buyer strategies that you and your buyer's agents use to work effectively with buyers. And before we start, I asked you about your goal for 2023, and you told me it's 100 million in volume.
Mhm.
Yes?
Yep.
Amazing. And average price, just to put it in perspective for the viewers, so we could all
About
envy you.
about 1.7.
1.7 million average price. Amazing. How exciting. And you're in Santa Monica,
Yep.
California. So anyone watching, if you need an amazing agent in Santa Monica, California, Regina is your girl. All right. So we were speaking a week or two ago, and you mentioned that you're doing open houses very successfully in attracting buyers and actually selling properties to these buyers. So, talk to the viewers a little bit about what's the whole process of having a very successful open house.
Sure. So what's so interesting is that I really started my career doing open houses. I found it much easier, 20 years ago to pick up buyers than it was to list properties. I didn't have a lot of connections in those days, and I was brand new to real estate. And so that's where I started. I think that's where a lot of people start. So I got a lot of practice early on in hosting open houses. In the last several years, I've focused almost solely on the seller side of the business as I've built a team, brought on buyer's agents, and really embraced the team model. I have gone some years, the entire year, without representing directly a buyer. With the shifting markets, we have to be able to shift our strategies and our approach and be really flexible. And so recently I've been holding more open houses. And I found that, I still have my open house chops from when I first started. And it's like riding a bike. It's a skill that once you learn, you can apply it going forward. And a lot of the same skills for an open house apply to any social situation that you might find yourself in when you're talking about real estate. So an open house is an awesome opportunity to meet the public. It's not like cold calling, because you've got people who at least are interested in real estate, and a good proportion of them are really ready to buy. So it's not like you're hitting random people on the phone and trying to get through a whole volume of folks to find the ready now buyers and sellers. You also will attract sellers to your open houses, so be ready for all of that. And so the way I approach an open house is I want to be prepared. Typically, it's my listing. I haven't sat someone else's listing in a really long time. But if you do that, you want to be very prepared. You want to know that property inside and out.
Okay,
So
let
yeah.
me just ask you a quick question. Do you have a selecting process, or do you hold any of your listings open?
Oh, it's usually a selective process. So typically I want to hold the first open house, and the seller wants me to hold the first open house. I've got a property now that's been tough to sell. We've been in disagreement on the pricing strategy. And we've been holding it open very frequently. It happens to be 2 blocks from my house. So it's a very convenient property for me to hold open. It's a great price range. It's 2.6 million. So we attract, very high priced buyers, and it's in a neighborhood where I already know everyone. So I'm talking to a lot of people in my sphere already because of that property. So that's an excellent one for me to hold open. Even though it's been on the market for a little while, we still get great traffic. Other great open houses for me to hold would be the first or second, early on in the process, because that's when we have the most traffic.
So would you say the one in particular that you're referring to right now, it hasn't sold, you've held it open a few times, you're attracting buyers are coming in and they're buying something else, I imagine.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So one of the things I want to do is I want to be an expert, right? So one of the ways that I convert buyers is that I'm an expert. I know the property that I'm at and I know the market that I'm in.
Mhm.
So I'm very familiar with the inventory and other houses that are open that weekend and the history of the other inventory in the market, how long it's been on, the price changes, all of that. So I can speak fluently about the things that the buyers already know. These buyers are going to other open houses, they're tracking properties online, they are going to know this market. And so I have to know the market as well. And that
Better
makes,
than they do, right? You're the
yes,
expert, exactly.
exactly. And so what that does is it really helps me to establish my validity, right? So that I can have these conversations in when people are there at the open house. So you're going to go through your greeting and welcome and how'd you hear about us and please sign in and all of the rigmarole. And I always circle back once someone has seen the property and say, what did you think? That's my opportunity. That's probably the most important thing I can say
Mhm.
at an open house, because that's the opportunity to find out if this particular person wants to have a conversation with me. If they want to have a conversation with me, then the next thing to find out is, are they a real buyer and do they want to work with me? But the people that don't even want to have a conversation with me, they're the people that I don't need to spend any time chasing out the door. Right? That's
Got
the
you.
first test. What
Yep.
do you think? Are we going to have a conversation? Are we going to have some rapport? That's a really good opportunity to start finding out, is this person real? And if they are real, do they want to work with me?
What percentage would you say is real that you end up following up and working with?
I'd say probably half the people are real buyers, real ready now buyers, and maybe half of them again might be interested in further conversation. And then if I get 2 or 3 real buyers converted out of 25, I'm knocking it out of the park.
Mhm.
My old goal used to be maybe convert 1 out of every open house, now it's 2. And
Yeah.
that's doable if you're really in conversation with people.
One of the things that I hear sometimes from clients that I've coached that do open houses and not as successful as you, they don't get enough traffic. Is there something you do in preparation for the open house to actually attract a lot of people coming in?
Well, if it's my listing, certainly yes, right? So that would be all of our marketing, that would be the pricing strategy, that would be networking with other agents, calling into the neighborhood, door knocking in the neighborhood, all of those things. I think door knocking in the neighborhood is a really great way to get people through the open house. It personalizes the invitation. It makes them feel special, that they're being really invited, especially if it's one of the first open houses that's being held. They might not have known about it yet. Plus, that's a great way to contact people and make connections with people in the neighborhood. So I think that's one of the best ways to prepare for an open house, is to either call into that neighborhood or especially door knock. That will absolutely up your traffic.
Or even a combination of both, since so
Of
many people
course.
have the do not
Mhm.
call list. So, let's say a few days prior to the open house or the week before, you're doing the calling and the door knocking around.
Yep. All of that works. And call your colleagues as well. I think that many times we need to get, um, if the open house looks busy,
Mm-hmm.
it creates buzz.
Yes.
People want to know, why are there people going in and out of that property?
Yes.
So even having your colleagues show up can attract other buyers, because people will be driving by. They're going to see a lot of people out front. That creates some buzz.
Mm-hmm. So colleagues, you mean other agents that you know,
Yeah.
that you've worked with that are
Yep.
selling homes in the area.
Mhm.
Excellent. Um, is there anything else? So let's say 50% you said would want to talk to you or continue a conversation. Then how soon do you contact them again, and what do you do? Do you just call? Do you email them something? How does that happen?
Right. So I'd say that about 50% want to have a conversation with me. And during that conversation at the open house, I try to find out if they've already got an agent. Okay.
Mhm.
And one of the most important things I do during the open house is try to find out, is there an opportunity here with this buyer? And that is a soft approach,
Uh,
right? That's not one of the first questions I ask. I want to engage the potential buyer in conversation first, because I want to develop that rapport, see how it goes. Are we starting to click? Is there a connection? Is it gonna Is this someone who's open, collaborative, interested, interesting, all of those things. And once we have some of that going, they'll start to sit down at the table with me. They want to talk about the other inventory. Like, my advice on that is to slow that process down. Slow that process down to have the conversation if you have the time at the open house.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're having a really busy open house and how
It
many
may not be possible, but
right.
as much as possible, have a bit of a conversation. And then if I do have that time at the open house, I'm going to find out if they have an agent. If I don't have the opportunity to do that at the open house, then of course I'm going to find out what's the story once I get into further conversation with them. I follow up the next day. So
The
I'm old school. I have a sign-in sheet. They have to use a pen.
mhm.
And also, before they leave, if I've had any conversation with them, I want to say, oh, hey, did you sign in? And they'll say, yeah, we signed in. And I'll say, well, let me make sure I can read it. And that
Mhm.
gives them an opportunity to either give me a better email or a phone number if they haven't given me the right one, or for me to really see what's their name, what's their phone number, and I can make some notes so that I remember what the conversation was, if any, right?
Beautiful.
The next day, I will call. So
Mm.
I call everyone, then I text everyone if they didn't pick up, and then I add them to my database. They get a welcome email, and then they start getting our weekly, newsletters. And we have a monthly newsletter and a weekly open house announcement. So
Okay.
they start getting the communication from us. If I do have a conversation with them, this is where I'm basically will say, tell me the whole story. Tell me what's going on. I really hand the floor to them. I want them to open up to me to
Yep.
tell me what's going on with them.
Yep.
And that's a really powerful conversation because they want to be heard, they want to unload. And then you're going to get a lot of information about where they are in the process. Do they have a pre approval and are they working with an agent?
Perfect. If they say they have an agent or are working with an agent, is that always a no-no for you? Because they may not really be happy with the agent. I'm just thinking, I never really worked with buyers. You're the expert on the open house. So I'm asking, if they say they're working with the buyers, are there any follow-up questions you ask
Sure.
or just let it go?
Absolutely. Many people will say, I'm working with an agent, even if they've had one conversation with somebody 2 years ago,
Mm,
because they're not really sure they want to commit to someone new. They're not really sure what the process is. It's like when you walk into a store and you're there to buy something, and the salesperson says, can I help you? And you say no.
yep.
Right? That's just our default. And so I will say, oh, great. I want to ask who they're working with. And if they don't really know the person's name, that's an indicator that there's not a real relationship there.
Mm.
And then I might ask, how did you meet them? Or how long have you been working together? And they'll give me whatever information. And then I might ask, well, how's it going? Are you satisfied with the service you're receiving? And if they say yes, and I'll say, I wish you the best. Have your agent call me if they're interested in any of our listings. But
Perfect.
if they say, or if they waffle at all, I say, well, great, I'm interviewing for the job. And at that point, I have rapport, right? So when I'm able to say I'm interviewing for the job, and if it's in person, I will point at myself, then I get right to the point. So we get rid of the awkwardness and we don't skirt around what the conversation is really about. I
Right.
want to get that out early. I want to make sure that I'm clear that I am interviewing for the job. And the people that really like my style, which is direct, are going to gravitate towards that.
Hmm.
So I've had this open house happening for a while now. And at one open house, I had a younger couple who have been looking and they've talked to a bunch of agents out there. And when they were talking to me, we just started conversing about the market at the open house. And we
Hmm.
spent about 5 or 10 minutes there, which was great, just connecting. And they said, oh, this is what we're looking for. I said, well, I'd be happy to help you. Give me a little bit more information. I will call you tomorrow. We'll set up a time to do a Zoom. And I did. And they picked me, and I could feel they were picking me. Right. So you got to be aware and in the conversation. I'm not chasing them. I'm just observing and being myself.
Right.
I don't have to be anything other than myself, and I will get my people.
Right.
And so they said, oh, this is what we're looking for. They're in a great price range up to like 4 million. I'm working with them with a buyer's agent, but I'm really taking the lead on this one, some complications for them. And we do a buyer consultation on Zoom. Then we set up some next steps. We set up a search for them and we start getting them out to see property. So
Amazing.
that was I think they had interviewed a couple of it. Remember, they're interviewing you at the open house. They may
Yes.
not know it, but they are.
Yes.
Okay.
From the
So they
minute they walk in, they're
from the
already
minute they walk.
sizing everything up. Yes.
Yeah. And that same open house, another couple came in and they just sat down and started talking to me. And, that's because I'm just open and I'm not like, hey, are you working with an agent as the first question out of my mouth? I want to see, I want to learn a little bit about them. I want to connect with them a little bit. I don't have to worry about converting every buyer. I'm looking for my people, right? And so I'm just having conversation with them and they sit down and they're like, we're really interested in this house and we want to write an offer. And I said, well, who's your agent? They said, we're thinking of using this agent that sold us our property. And I said, when's the last time you spoke to her? And they said, about 3 years ago.
Mm.
And she's actually from out of the area. And I said, it might make sense for you to hire a local person. If you feel strongly about working with that agent, you go ahead and work with her. But if you're open to working with someone else, and I pointed at myself, I said, I'm interviewing for the job.
Amazing. And you
And they
got
said,
them, I'm sure, right?
huh?
And they're working with you. They
Yeah, of
are.
course. They're in escrow for
Yeah.
3.6 million.
Amazing. And
Yeah.
one really, really important thing that you said is you know the area, you know the market, you know the properties, you are an expert. Because if you and I want to make sure that the viewers get that, because I'm sure that's a huge part of you being able to connect and have these conversations with the buyers that
Yeah.
walk in. Because if you're just sitting there, not you, like an agent, just sits at an open house and they don't have anything to share or have an intelligent conversation, then obviously this is not going to work.
Right.
100%.
And that's an easy thing to do, Jackie. It's 5 minutes a day on the MLS. It's an easy thing to do. Look at the active, pending, and sold for the last 30 days for 5 minutes a day on the MLS.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Know the
Mhm.
market and know the inventory. How many buyers, or sometimes I know sellers walk into open houses too, but on average, how many people do you have walking into one of your open houses?
So for this particular property, which has been on the market for a while, we're having anywhere between like 12 to 25.
Hmm. Okay,
A
nice.
real busy open house will be like 40.
Uh-huh. And did I hear you say your goal is a minimum of one buyer that you actually
Yep.
convert into working with you, or one or two or more, as many as possible, but at the very
Two.
least
Two
one? Yeah,
converted, yep, from
two.
every open house. And I think that's a really doable goal. So I had about 4 or 5 people on one of these same open houses. 2 of them are nurturers. One's a seller and a buyer, and one's a relocating here from the East Coast. I'm nurturing both of those because they're not quite ready yet.
Mhm.
But I do follow up with them. Now it's every 2 weeks. So first it's like call them several times in the first week. Then you've got some rapport established, set up their search, start communicating with them around the properties that they're getting. And now it's talk to them every 2 weeks because they're not quite ready. One said it'll be a few months, one said it'll be a year, but you still have to stay in touch at least
Right.
every 2 weeks with these folks, or they'll find someone else.
100%. And
Mhm.
you have the monthly newsletters and the
Yep.
weekly open house announcements. So they're
Mhm.
getting that from you as well.
Correct.
And that leads me into any buyer strategies for actually getting them to buy a property that will close. What can you share in terms of, now you have this buyer, you got them at the open house, you're doing all this follow up? Is there anything else that the agents
Yeah,
should
I think
know?
you really got to be on their side. I
Mm,
think that you really have to help them find the property that they want and not force them into buying one that they're not sure about, because nothing will sour a relationship than trying to shoehorn a buyer into the wrong
mhm,
property. And
mm,
so it might take a little bit of time and a little bit more work, especially in a low inventory market. But I think when you really do that for the buyer and listen to their needs and really try to find something that matches their needs, that's when one, you become closer to them professionally and personally. The relationship is strengthened, and then you have a better chance of actually getting them to buy, to go forward with the transaction. The other thing is to really address any fears that they might be having. They
Mhm.
might be afraid about the interest rate. They might be afraid about, what's going to happen with the economy. That you have to go back to what is their motivation for buying. When you know their motivation for buying, you can use that to create some urgency and make sure that we create actually getting to the end point, right? So it's really getting to know them, really getting to know their needs and motivations, and then driving to serving that stuff. In a low inventory market, you can also send a marketing letter out, right, to a certain neighborhood or property type. We're going to do that for a buyer who has a specific little area that they want. They're ready to buy. There just hasn't been anything that's been suitable for them. And we can use her, at least part of her name. We probably won't identify her
Right.
particularly, but we want to give enough information about her that she's a real person and not just one of these generic, I have a buyer, generic marketing letters.
Right.
And so when you're really doing that, you've got a buyer who is going to transact with you, and you might not be able to hurry them. I don't think there's a lot of hurrying in this time and space, but you will commit them to you.
Right. Or if they are a ready, willing, and able buyer, it's a matter of, with your expertise, knowing exactly what they're looking for and finding that property for
Yeah,
them. I think a mistake that you and I haven't talked about this, so I don't know what you would say. A mistake that a lot of agents do is they think that just showing buyers a lot of properties is going to help them sell, and I actually think the more you keep showing them what they don't want, the less they trust you. Like, well,
agree.
do you not
Agree.
know the inventory? Do you not know? Do you don't
Do
understand
not know
what I'm
me
looking for?
them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Do not know them. No, I think you're very right. And then they get into I see buyers get into who are motivated to buy, try to force the situation themselves. And
Mm,
I really want to try to caution my buyers to not buy something that they don't really like. They have to really like it, if not love it.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, and so I think that really learning about them and really trying to deliver to that is super important. And showing them a lot is not important, but staying in contact a lot with them is important. So even if you don't have anything to show them this week, you still call them.
right.
You say, I looked at all the inventory, I took a pass on these are the three closest, but I still don't think they're close enough. You
Right.
let me know if you want to see them, and we'll still keep at it.
Do
But
you
staying in contact is super important.
do you set up an auto search in the MLS
Yeah.
for all these buyers? You do.
We don't do it. We do it through my brokerage. I prefer
Okay.
their search.
Yes.
And so I do set up the auto search, and we create the parameters as tight as we can around what they want. And then I'm constantly looking at the results as well. And in
Perfect.
that search through our brokerage, we can communicate within the search. They can
Mhm.
like and comment and, all of that. So made it really easy for us to stay in communication within the actual application.
Amazing. It's so
Yeah.
exciting to speak with you. There's so much knowledge about all this buyer open house stuff, which is not my expertise. So thank you. Is
Yes,
there
my
anything
pleasure.
in closing that you were complete? I mean, you shared so much great information.
I just think that there are a lot of buyers out there, and this year might be more buyer heavy. So you got to be prepared to work with buyers. One thing I want to add was a really interesting conversation I had with a buyer recently.
Mhm.
They're in escrow, someone that I met at this open house. They're in escrow, and here we are. We have contingencies here, so they have cancellation rights here in California. And the husband was quite anxious when we were getting close to removing all the contingencies, because that's when the commitment happens. You have to remember that your buyers are going to get anxious, they're going to be nervous, and it might come out as a bad temper. It
Mm,
might come out as some kind of behavior that isn't direct, right? But that if you're really paying attention, you can see as anxiety. And you have to be ready to say, I'm noticing that you seem a little anxious. We're getting ready to commit to this purchase. Tell me what's going on right now. Because then you can address it
Yeah.
And the more you're having these conversations and like labeling what you think it is that's going on, the closer you become to them as people, and they'll be your clients for life. But then you can get these problems out on the table that might derail the transaction if you don't address them.
Wow, that is
So
amazing advice.
take good care of them. They'll be with you for life.
Wow, amazing. And at some point, they're gonna sell that property, be the listing
Exactly.
agent. They're gonna refer a lot of people. So excellent. Wow, so much great information. Thank you
Thank
so much. It's
you.
always a pleasure. For those of you who are watching, there's another interview that I did with Regina several months ago on my channel that's doing amazing. She shared a lot of great information there too. So great to see you, girl. Thank you
Great to
again.
see you too. Thanks, Jackie.